Okay, so in this video we're going to go over control statements. I'll write that here. Control statements. Pretty much how to make decisions in a program. Decisions in a program. We're going to go over 3 different control statements. The first one will be if, else if. The next one will be a counter controlled while loop, and the last one will be a Sentinel controlled while loop. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so I have here the gradebook and the gradebook test. So I'm going to create some methods in the gradebook class here. If you remember, we have our instance variable, course name. We have the property for that course name. And then we have a constructor here that takes one argument. It has a parameter called course name. And the constructor's job is to initialize any instance variables in the class. So in this case, we only have one. So this course name, this parameter goes here, and then it ends up jumping to the set accessor, and then that value is stored in the private instance variable. Okay, so to demonstrate if else if, I'm going to create a method here. So what is this method going to do? This method will taking an average as a parameter, it will determine a letter grade. So what do I mean? So of course we know anything that's 90 or higher is an A. So greater than or equal to 90 is A. Anything between the range of 89 and 80 is a B. Anything in the range of 79 and 70 is a C. Anything within the range of 69 and 60 is a D. And anything else that doesn't fall within this category here is an F. Okay, so let me show you how to create a method that would do something like this. First of all, it's going to be public. The return type is void because it's just going to display the letter grade. It's not going to return any sort of value. And we should call it something appropriate. Determine letter grade. And it's going to take one parameter. We're going to pass an integer of average. Okay. So with that parameter being passed to this method, we're going to set up our if else if structure. All right. So if average is greater than or equal to 90, then this program should do something. All right, so we're talking about the value that is fed to this argument, this guy here. All right, so when the average is greater than or equal to 90, we want the method to print to the screen the letter A. Okay, so let's say we pass a 92. 92 is greater than or equal to 90, so then the program will print out an A. But what if they pass an 82 instead? Well, then we need something to handle that and write to the screen a B instead. So in this case, we'll use else if average is greater than or equal to 80, then we will print to the screen a B. And then when you're working with if, else, if, sometimes we have a lot of braces, so sometimes it might get a little confusing. So you can go ahead and comment this. This could be end of method, and this curly brace here is end of class. Right. So let me give ourselves a little bit more room. Okay, so let's say they pass an 82. Is 82 greater than or equal to 90? The answer is no. So this statement here is false. So then it's going to move on to the next if. Is 82 greater than or equal to 80? Yes, it is. So this statement is true. So when this is true, then whatever statements are within this block here will be executed. In this case, we only have one statement, so it'll write the letter B to the screen. But let's say we pass a 72 or a 71 instead, then neither of these conditions here will be true. So then we need a different else if. Else if average is greater than or equal to 70, then console.writeLine the letter C. Okay. So now we pass a 72. Is 72 greater than or equal to 90? No. So then it moves on to the next one. Is 72 greater than or equal to 80? No, it's not. Is 72 greater than or equal to 70? Yes. So then this condition, this condition is true, then this statement will be executed. Okay, so then what if we pass a 62 instead? So then else if average is greater than or equal to 60, then print the letter D. Okay, so then we pass the 62. 62 is not greater than or equal to 90. 62 is not greater than or equal to 80. 62 is not greater than or equal to 70. 62, however, is greater than or equal to 60. So then the D will be written to the screen. Okay. Now the next thing, let's say they get a grade lower than 60, then we need some sort of condition for that, right? But any other grade other than A, B, C, or D is going to be an F, right? So it doesn't matter if they get a 59, a 39, a 10, a 0, a negative 10. Anything other than these four letters here is automatically an F. And since there's no other conditions left to check, then we just do else console.writeLine you failed. Right, because let's say they got 110, that'll definitely be greater than or equal to 90. So then only this statement will run, and then that'll be the end of the application. That'll be the end of the method. Then this curly brace will be executed here, and then it'll go back to the main, right? So only one of these will run in an if else if. Okay, so let's go ahead and test this out, see how it works. I'm gonna save it, go to my test class here, get rid of this. So to test out our method, we need to create an object of type gradebook, give it some sort of name, so I'm going to call it obj, and then use equals the new keyword, and then call the constructor. The constructor in this case, since we defined our own, we have to pass the course name. So here I'm just going to pass CITP 3310. Okay, so now that I've created an object. So here, let me label this for you. Create an object of type gradebook. Then the next thing I want to do is I want to call the determine letter grade method. So to call it, all you do is first type the object name, obj. Then we call the member access operator, the dot, and then we can choose the different methods that are available to us. We want the one we just defined, which is called determine letter grade, and it takes an argument of average, right? So we can test out each condition, right? So I'm going to pass the 75. Okay, so let's go ahead and run it and see what it does, right? So it prints out the letter C. Okay, so now let's actually see it in the debugger. All right, so I'm going to put the mark here. Then I'm going to start debug here, and then we'll actually see it as it moves through the different if-else statements. Okay, so then we put start here. Then I'm going to step into this method call. All right, so then it starts at the curly brace, the first one. Then it's going to check this condition. And remember, we have, for average, we have 75. I can leave that there. Right, so 75 is not greater than or equal to 90. So we're going to step over that. Okay, so now it moves on to the next one. And if you hover over the condition, we can see that it's false. So it's going to pass that one as well. Then here we have 75, and then the condition is true. So then now let's see what it does. Okay, so then now it goes to the next curly brace. Step into that. Then it goes to this statement here. And right now at this point, there's nothing on the screen. Okay, so let me keep this here. I'm going to pin this to the screen. Okay. Then let's continue stepping into it. So now I'm going to step into the console.writeLine statement, and then now you see that the letter C was printed to the screen. Then the next brace, it's going over that one. Then it jumped to the very end of it. It didn't execute any of the other else ifs since we already found one that was true, so it just skipped everything else. Then it goes to the end of the method, and then it goes back to the originating call. Then it's going to the last brace of the main, and then the program ends. Okay, so that was just a quick overview of if, else if, right? So now I'm going to take this off. Now I'm going to show you, I'm going to comment this out because now I'm going to declare a new method. And this method I'm going to show you how to do looping, or how to write a while loop. So let me start with that. Okay, so I'm going to declare a new method. So let me set that up for you. Okay, so for this method, let's say our class took a quiz. The class consists of 10 students. So we want to determine the average for all the grades of those 10 students. Alright, so we want the entire class average. Okay, so to do that, we need to get all the 10 grades, add them all up, and then divide that by 10, and that'll give us the class average. Okay, so let's define a new method. Method, we'll call it, we'll say it's public. It'll be void as well. And then this one will be calculate class average. It'll take no arguments. Okay, so what we're going to need here is a counter controlled while loop. Okay, so to determine our class average, first we need to calculate the total of the 10 grades. So it's a good idea to declare a variable, and we'll call it total. Now keep in mind that whenever you declare variables within a method, those variables they're called local variables, and by default they're not initialized with any sort of value, right? This integer total doesn't have a 0 stored in it, so if we don't set some sort of value for it, we might have issues later on trying to use it. So it's always a good idea when you're working with local variables to go ahead and set its value, right? So when we start out, the total is going to be 0, right? So we can already say that int total is 0, right? So we'll start with that. Okay, so then the next thing we need in a counter controlled while loop is we actually need a counter, right? Because this loop needs to run 10 times, so we need to keep track of how many times it's run. If we don't want it to go over those 10 times, so it's a good idea to declare a variable called counter, and initially it starts off at 0 as well. Okay, so then the next variable we'll need is the user is going to have to enter those 10 grades that we're going to total together, right? So we need a variable to store each grade that the user inputs into our method. So then we can declare a variable called grade, And if you want to, you can set it to 0, right? Because we don't have a grade yet. So it's a good idea. Just might as well make things simpler. Just go ahead and initialize it. Okay. So I think that, oh yeah, we need one more variable, very important variable, which is going to be the average itself. Normally an average is decimal, because when you're dividing numbers, usually it's rare for you to get, a perfect um, integer division, right? But for this example, we're just trying it out, so we can just go ahead and make it an int for now. In another example, we'll actually declare it as either a decimal or a double, and then that way we can get back a floating point value. So average, int average, and we'll say it's 0, right? Because we're just declaring it. Okay, so now we have our variables. I think we have everything we need. So now we can actually write the while loop. Right, so the syntax for a while is you type the word while and then some sort of condition that goes in the parentheses, and as long as whatever's in this statement is true, then we have a set of braces. While this condition is true here, then all the statements in this code block will be executed, right? But we don't want just to write the word true like this, because then this loop will run forever, and you'll get what's called an infinite loop, right? So we don't want that. Instead, we want to write some sort of condition that we can use to control how many times this loop will run. So in our case here, we have this variable called counter, so we're going to use that to control our loop. So counter is less than 10, right? So as long as the counter is less than 10, then the statements here will run, right? It'll keep repeating this this code block here will keep repeating it over and over until 10 is reached, right? But we're not actually changing the value of 10, so we need to make sure that we do that. So we can do that now. So inside the loop, we can do counter equals counter plus 1, right? So each time the loop runs, counter will be incremented by 1 until eventually it actually until it reaches the number 9, because 0 through 9 is 10 numbers, right? So it'll run 10 times. Okay, so what do we want it to do 10 times? Now that we have everything set up, first we want to ask the user to enter a grade, right? So then we'll put that inside the loop, and then we'll say something like enter grade. Actually, we want it to be just a write. Console.write enter grade. Then the user will enter a grade. So whatever they enter, we want to assign it to the grade variable. The grade variable we declared here. So grade is whatever the user types for the grade. But keep in mind that whenever the user types something into the console, or into the command prompt, by default it's a string, right? So we need to convert whatever they type, we need to convert it to an integer, right? Because this variable here only holds an int, so we need to convert it. So we need to call the convert class, convert dot to, and there's already a method, to int32. So it's a two-step process. First we get the input from the user, that input is converted to an integer, and then it's assigned to grade. Actually, that would be more like 3 steps, but you get the idea. Okay, so once we have a grade, then we need to keep running total, right? So we already have a variable for that as well. So then we do total equals total plus grade. So I can label these for you. So here is prompt user for value, store value from user and convert to int. Here is a summation, right? So total started at 0. So let's say I enter the number 82. So it would be 0 plus 82. So 0 plus 82 equals 82. So then that would be stored in the total variable. Then here I'm going to increment the counter. So that way eventually when counter is no longer less than 10, when it actually becomes 10, then the loop will not run anymore. Right? So that's what this is how this works. Okay, so then the last thing we need to do, or actually a couple more things in this method. So once we have the total, then we're ready to determine the average, right? So here we have a variable already for average. So then that's average equals whatever the total is divided by 10, because we have 10 grades. And then now the last thing is to display the average. Console dot write line, the average is average. Okay, so then this here calculates average, and then this displays the average. Okay, so I believe now we're ready to test this method. So we can go back here. We already have a gradebook object. So then now we're going to call the new method we just wrote. So it's obj dot, and then we have the method we defined earlier that takes an integer for average, and then here calculate class average, which doesn't take any arguments, so an empty set of parentheses, right? So now this method will be called, and when that's called, then it'll run all the statements in the method here. So let's go ahead and try it out. Control F5. All right, so enter grade. So I'm going to enter 82, 87, 90, 86, 85, I guess 91, 84, 87, lower this a little bit, 79, 89, right? So then the average is 86. All right, so it took a little bit, but you see that it ran 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. And then once the 10th time it ran, then it displayed the average at that point, because this condition was no longer true. Right, so once counter reaches 10, 10 is no longer less than 10, so then the loop will break, and then the statements here will be run instead. Okay, so the last thing I wanted to show you was how to do a while loop but that's controlled using a Sentinel. All right, so let me explain that to you. It's a little bit different than the counter controlled variable. Okay, so when we use a Sentinel controlled loop, we usually use it when we don't know how many values we're going to be working with, right? In the first case, we had 10 grades, but let's say we don't actually know how many grades there are. We need another way to stop or to break the loop, right? So you can use what's called a Sentinel. So let me show you real quick. Okay. So for this, we're going to create a variable. That variable will serve as the way we're going to stop the loop from running. So I'm going to use, for this example, I'm going to use a string. I'm going to call it Sentinel. And I'm going to initialize it because it's a local variable. I'm going to initialize it to the letter Y for which represents yes, right? And then here it's complaining because we haven't used it yet, but we're going to use it right now. So we're going to write our while loop, but our condition here is going to be while Sentinel is not equal to n, which stands for no. And then we're going to encase the rest of this code within this while loop here, right? So while the Sentinel does not equal n for no, then this loop will continue running forever, right? So usually the way to use this is at the end, after whatever process you want is executed, then you prompt the user to some sort of response. You could ask him something like, do you want to enter another set of 10 grades, right? And then they can either enter Y for yes or enter N for no. If they enter anything other than N for no, then the loop will continue running. But the minute they enter N and the minute that Sentinel equals N, then the loop will break. Right, so let me show you that. So here, prompt the user. So enter another set of grades. And then you can give them clues on how to answer the question. So Y for yes, N for no. So then here we need to get the response, so get the answer from the user here. So Sentinel is going to be equal to console.read line. Okay. So and keep in mind that this is the end of the loop here. End of while loop. Here's the end of main, and then here is the end of the class. Kind of space this out a little bit, right? So keep in mind all these statements here are contained within this while loop. So let's go ahead and run this here. So enter set grade. So I'm going to enter 40, 40, 40, 40. Right, so the average is, since they're all 40, right? So we divide by 10, we get the answer of 40. Now, do you want to enter another set of grades? I'm going to type yes. So then it's going to ask me again for another set of 10 grades. So I'm going to do 100, 100, 100, 100, 90, 90, 90, 90, 90. So the average is 94. Now, do I want to enter another set of grades? And it's like, no, I'm done already. So then I'm going to type N. Press enter. And then the program ends. Right? So I could have kept pressing Y. I could have kept pressing any other letter. And this loop would have continued running forever. It was not until I pressed the N and then this condition became false that the loop then the loop was broken after that. So if Sentinel N is not N, then it continues running. But since they were equal, when I put the letter N in, so Sentinel is N, then this statement is false and the loop no longer runs. So I hope that helped a little bit and helped make sense of control statements for you.